Good evening, everybody. I guess we are recording. And this evening, we're going to continue on our patterns. And tonight, we're going to work on overcompensation because there are some of us who do that for different reasons, with different motivations within. So, as always, we always start with the emotional self. And so the question I always ask is, how does this work in your emotional self? In what ways do you overcompensate for the way that you feel about something, maybe something that you may have said to somebody, maybe you didn't respond in a particular way that, I don't know, you may have thought you should have or shouldn't have had. What this also does is it brings up another cycle, if you will, kind of like a setup for anger. And it goes like this. Something happens, you feel bad about it, and you overcompensate for it. And unconsciously, you expect some kind of acknowledgement for what you did. In other words, for the overcompensation. Hey, I went out of my way to be nice, to be thoughtful. I even got you a little present to kind of make up for what I did. And the other person does not necessarily acknowledge your compensation, your apology, your gift, whatever. And then because they didn't respond the way that you thought they should respond, then they get into, or you get into a place of anger, which can trigger your pattern of resentment. So it really is something to be mindful of. So if you do have a tendency to overcompensate, the question comes up, in what ways do you do that? Could it be any one of the things I just mentioned? And what are the things that others do to you that would cause you to respond in an overcompensating way? I guess it's really more of, what is it do you do to others that makes you feel bad, that makes you think you need to compensate, and in doing so, you may have a tendency to overcompensate. Hopefully that was clear. And if not, let me know. Because overcompensation is something that we may not necessarily be conscious of the fact that we're doing it until we end up being angry over the situation. And that's because of the lack of response that we expected someone to give back to us. When it comes to the physical self, that's really easy because, what type of activity do you engage in to demonstrate how much better you are than everybody else? Some guys go to the gym, to work out. Ladies as well go to the gym and really exert themselves to the point of creating a physique that may be overcompensated. And the question is, for what? And we see some of these people who are bodybuilders that it loses its symmetry, it loses its beauty, so to speak, where they become overdeveloped. So that would be one way. You may, work with somebody on a project where it requires physical labor, and you go out there and you dig the ditch, or you start chopping wood for them, and to the point where you push yourself into physical exhaustion. And again, you may not think of it as overcompensating, but the reality is that that's exactly what you're doing, and to the detriment of your own health and well-being. So that too is something to take a look at. Or, and there may be, you may be on a team, or you may be learning a sport or doing something. And again, to, prove to the instructor, to prove to your teammates that you can do it, and look how well I can do it. And that too could lead you down to a path of overcompensation. In the material self, that's really easy. And the questions come up, and how is it do you overcompensate? Do you end up spending more money on the people, a particular person? Do you demonstrate how wonderful you are by showering people with gifts, by always picking up the tab, always over tipping? So, what are those things? Because on some levels, overcompensation can lead you down a path to depletion. So you've got to be mindful of that, because you can deplete yourself emotionally, certainly. You can deplete yourself physically, and materially. You really can end up being in a doghouse financially, because you've gone overboard in terms of gift buying, in terms of just squandering the money, which would also tie back into yet another pattern, that one of depletion and denial. And that's the thing about these patterns, is that they are so interwoven with each other. Not all of them, obviously, but you need to understand which ones you're susceptible to, which ones you've incorporated into your life. And what would be good is, in understanding the patterns that you are susceptible to, is to try to track down what the concept is and where that concept comes from. Was mom one to overcompensate? As far as the family goes, she was the one they always called on. She was the one that was always doing for the sisters, the brother, the mom, the dad, the aunts, the nephews, the nieces. So somebody teaches us these concepts that we have to deal with in our lives. That's why it's so essential to identify where they're coming from and why we have these patterns. And then creating going back to the symbol dictionary part of it, because the symbols will tell you, hey, you're into overcompensation. And it may be that for some reason, the first thing that came to my mind was a hammer. I have no idea, but I'll try to work on that one. But it may be you feel that you have to do the work. You have to put the things together. You've got to nail down the projects that are going on, and that it's your responsibility on a material level to make sure that everything is proper, that everything is right. Where does that come from? So understand the symbols that you work with to help you identify which particular pattern you're in and what is the outcome of the pattern. You can get into the overcompensation, and like I said earlier, if you expect something in return, either consciously or unconsciously, and you need to discern whether or not that's a viable thing in your life. If you're expecting some kind of acknowledgement that, wow, you really, you were very generous, you gave to everybody. If you expect that and don't get it, well, that could again go down the path to anger. So take a look at whether or not this is something you have a tendency to do. Like I said, it could be over tipping, showering people with gifts, buying extravagant gifts for people that they're just too much. Socially is another area. And do you do a lot of entertaining? Are you social every weekend? I have, a cousin and his wife. They are out with people every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. They can't believe that Phyllis and I don't socialize like they socialize. I don't get it. It's hard for me to relate to. But there are some people that need to do that. And the question is, where is that coming from? On some levels, I think that people have a hard time being with themselves or just being with their partner and enjoying each other, either in conversation or just knowing that you're both there together, whatever it is you're doing, sharing whatever it is, sharing a movie, sharing a meal, having a conversation. whatever the case may be. So if you do a lot of entertaining, where is that coming from? Is it being done to avoid personal interaction? Not only interaction, but intra-action. I think that's the right word for going into the self. Because if you're constantly busy outside of yourself, then there's no time to go into yourself. So overcompensation as a pattern of behavior could also turn into the pattern of distraction, because it keeps you from looking at yourself, which is the most important thing at this stage of our lives. Actually, at every stage of life, one needs to become conscious of one's actions and whether or not they're really helping the individual to grow. Because, again, when it comes to the social self, we may be looking for accolades from others, acknowledgement that we exist. We may need to be the center of attention. So there's a lot of different things here, and that may be part of the overcompensation. You know, look at what I'm doing for you. It goes back to the material self. Hey, I picked up the check for everybody. You know, hey, look how wonderful I am. So all of these things need to be examined, need to be questioned, and need to be looked at to see how it may be working in your social life, which it could be tied into your material life. Now, obviously, from a spiritual self point of view, I wrote down, you know, go to church or temple or synagogue every day, every Wednesday night, I believe is church night, or do good deeds in hope of being saved. There is, you know, I posted I posted a thing on the mind as a tool, and one of the responses that I got was something to the effect of, without going to church, without worshiping, you know, Jesus Christ, you can't grow, you can't, you know, you can't be saved, whatever the case may be. And I think that this is part of that overcompensation, in the sense that I need you to validate me and my belief system by following and doing what I believe in. And I'm going to tell you what I believe in. Now, you could say that I'm doing the exact same thing, and yes, I am, except that the God here is you within yourself. Remember, Jesus taught the kingdom of God is within. Man teaches you that the kingdom of God is out there. Not the same. Man takes you away from God, and Jesus, as a teacher, not a savior, because if you know the history of Jesus, then you realize, or you know, that he was both an Essene, and the people who first followed him were Gnostics. And the whole thing of Gnosticism was that salvation was based on knowledge, the knowledge of freeing up the self, giving up the ego self, the emotional self, so that the spiritual self can manifest. So some people, because it's culture, it's tradition, it's, you know, mom went, dad went, they went to the church every Sunday, you know, every Wednesday, whatever the case may be. Also, part of that is volunteering for the church. Now, don't misunderstand me, because on some levels, in fact, Phyllis and I were talking about this evening, and it's kind of scary of what's going on in the world. But religion did help keep people in line, so to speak, kept them moral, kept them ethical, kept them from engaging in hateful things. As they turn away from the church, and then you have, you know, the new neo-Nazis, the white supremacists, and these people claim to be Christian, but they're so far away, they're the exact opposite of what Christianity is supposed to be about. Remember, Jesus taught to love one another as your brother, as yourself. Well, it's more about hate. So we see, and what our conversation was about, is that the more people turn away from religion and not turning into spirituality, but just, there is, in fact, somebody wrote, you know, wanted me to get off a site that I had posted because there is no God. It's been proven that there's no God. And actually it was Awakening Inner Consciousness was the group. And I found that to be very hypocritical, because for somebody to be quote unquote a seeker and seeking to develop inner consciousness and not to realize that we're part of something greater, and then to spew hate, didn't make a damn bit of sense. But that's what we're seeing unfolding, that we're moving more into a darker period of time, into more of a hateful period of time, as people turn away from God, from Jesus, from Shiva, from Buddha, as they turn away, period, and deny the spiritual self-expression, things are getting worse. So in terms of the self, which is what we're about, and growing the self, understanding the self, seek to understand whether or not overcompensation in religious dogma and religious expression, whether or not you're going overboard, for what that's worth. Another pattern, and this one ties into the pattern of rejection. And I think I told you a story. I have a bud who's always late. He's had a very interesting life, to say the least. And from the emotional self, it is the emotional self that requires, in this case, the rejection. And obviously, always being late is a fabulous way of getting it. Late to class, late to meetings, late to appointments, late to interviews, late for social engagements, which we'll talk about when we get to the social. But the bottom line is that what is being manipulated here is that because the mind is seeking rejection, because the emotional self needs rejection to feel loved. Remember, it's all about acceptance. It's all about love as a form of acceptance. And because rejection is the modus operandi of this particular individual, of any individual who is always being late, you got to know that there's a feeling of insecurity, a feeling of uncertainty that would stimulate getting rejection. And there's so many different ways to get it, which we'll go into here. And we did go into it in the patterns of behavior that were entitled about being, into rejection. Always being late is tied into that. Also, another thing is that when it comes to dealing with others, how do you make others be late? Do you tell somebody you're going to pick them up for something, or you're supposed to meet your wife or your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever the case may be? You tell them you're going to be at a certain time, and because they need to be someplace, and yet you may end up creating a situation that makes them late, which then gives them an attitude towards you. When it comes to the physical self, what occurred to me, and I think I told you that whenever we were going to have dinner, if we were going to have dinner for, let's say, 6:30, we would tell my bud to be at the house, that dinner was going to be served at 6. So we know he would show up 6:15, 6:20. That way we were in time and dinner would be on time. There are a lot of situations in life, and there's another situation. There are situations that come up, and this is what really needs to be questioned, because it appears that things unfolded, and I just flashed on when I used to work in retail. I worked for a department store, and at one point I was assistant store manager. And so I, had to be home. We just had, I think, our second child. And so, my wife had, dinner and take care of an 18-month-old and a newborn. And so it was important that I be home right after work. Well, something comes up at work, and of course, you get delayed. Now, there's a couple of different ways to looking at that. One, you can always say, oh, hey, I couldn't help it. They asked me to do this at the last minute. What is the hardest thing to do? Now, first, before I go there, now, I could always logically, rationally, justifiably explain why I was late. The other side of the coin in this particular situation, maybe in all given situations, let's go there. In all given situations, you draw to you whatever it is that you need in order to fulfill a particular pattern of behavior. Now, as a habit, we are always 5 minutes early, or we will intentionally be, because I like to be early, and Phyllis, prefers to be 5 minutes late because I think that's more social. Plus, we've gotten to places where we're supposed to be there at 7. We get there at 6:55, and they're still not prepared for guests at 7. But my point is that you will draw to you whatever it is you need in order to fulfill your pattern of behavior, whatever the pattern may be. In this case, it's always being late, not occasionally being late, not intentionally, socially being late, but always it's part of the modus operandi. So you have to know that you draw to you those situations that will cause you to be late, and for the reason of getting the rejection. And I know that's hard to take, drawing things to you, because our tendency is to point outward and say, well, no, I'm late because I had a flat tire. I'm late because I ran out of gas. I'm late because there was an accident on 35 and I got tied up in traffic. And no, you did not cause the traffic accident. However, had you left 5 minutes, 10 minutes early, you may have gotten past the accident. So there's always these variables, and there are some times that you find yourself in situations that, yes, you cannot help being late. That's the occasional. But always know that whatever the pattern is, if it's rejection, if it's withdrawal, if it's self-pity, if it's being a victim, if it's being dissatisfied, if it's being depleted, if you're into denial, whatever the pattern is, you're going to draw to you that situation, that person, that event that will allow you to fulfill the expectation and the goal of the pattern. And how it happens is that everything is based on energy. We are spiritual beings in a material body. You've heard me say that countless times. And that our material body is really a reflection of our energy at work. This is why in the relaxation disc, if you get it, I know a couple of you have it, but if you get the relaxation disc and you use it and you go into the pyramid of the self and you get down to the chamber of examination, it's all about seeing your aura, which is the color vibration and the color manifestation of the harmony of your physical body. Because when you examine it from that point of view, you can see where the red is, which is your mind's way of saying, hey, you better pay attention to this area of your body because this area is in disharmony. So there's that. Because everything is made up of atoms. Atoms have either a positive or a negative charge. Your mind operates your brain, and your brain is an electromagnetic generator. So it's constantly, as an electromagnet, either drawing to you what you need to fulfill your programming, to fulfill your pattern, or you're repelling from you maybe opportunities to change, opportunities to fool the pattern, opportunities to break the pattern. Okay? So know that you are the center of your universe, either drawing to you what you need, and you need to question what it is that you need, what it is that you're drawing to you. Are you drawing it to you to fulfill a pattern, or are you drawing to you what you need to grow? And this is where programming comes in. And the teaching behind all that is, know what is before thine eyes, and all the mysteries are revealed, because you're co-creating your reality. So being late in the material self, I put down, have you lost opportunities because of being late, and have you lost money because of being late? And some of that, you could say, people have lost opportunities to get hired because they were late to the interview. And, if you're interviewing somebody, as I have, and as some of you may have, either because you've been in a managerial position or you own a business, you've interviewed people. And if you have an appointment at 2:00 and they show up at 2:15, 2:20, they will have a good, logical, rational, justifiable excuse. But at the same time, you need to understand that that may be a pattern at work. It just depends on the excuse that they give and how viable or valid you think that excuse is. And now, as we move forward, because you now have eyes that see and ears to hear and understand about patterns of behavior and concepts, you should be able to discern the truth of that individual. Some people, somebody will tell somebody something, hey, that gold is at $800 an ounce. Maybe you should buy some. I can wait. I'm just, right now I don't have $800. I don't want to put it on my credit card. Now, gold has almost doubled itself, and I think in about 2 years. And it's still climbing. The more uncertainty there is, the more that gold and silver will climb. And because of being late in the buying of something, in the investing of something, there may be lost opportunities and lost monies. So something to be mindful of, something to think about. When it comes to the social self, what I wrote down were two fundamental things. What benefit do you derive from being late? Aside from the benefit of the rejection, is there something deeper? Do you become the center of attention, even if it's negative because you were late and everybody's got to, everybody's there, you finally come in, maybe you even make a scene. Now, I'm back to saying you, and I'm not necessarily meaning you, but I don't know who's listening to this, and hopefully down the road, someone who is under the curse of this particular pattern of behavior, they will be able to relate to it and get something from it. But some people derive a pleasure. Obviously, the basic underneath drive is getting that rejection, which makes them feel, okay, I'm being loved. That's a good thing. So are there other benefits beyond the rejection, like becoming the center of attention, making the conversation all about, hey, why were you late? What was going on? What were you doing? Oh, why did you do that? And then you can build the conversation from being late. It may be your, way of becoming the center of attention, making everything that's going on about you. And I know that you have friends that are like that are always late, always try to draw the conversation around themselves. to make themselves the center of attention, even if it's negative. So there's that. Well, spiritual self, apparently, I don't have anything written down. That's funny. I makes me question whether or not I missed this altogether. However, from the spiritual self, again, you could relate it back to church services or synagogue or, temple, whatever your particular faith is that you are following, if you do follow a faith. And again, being late, if the doors are closed and you open the doors, of course, everyone's going to turn around to see who came in late. Again, it's kind of like the social thing. It makes you pay attention to the self. You may be, from a different point of view entirely, being late to really, I guess it doesn't, I was going to say questioning your spiritual drive, your spiritual awareness, whether or not you even think in terms of being spiritual. Some people don't. They think that as long as they're religious, they are being spiritual. I think otherwise. I think that there is definitely a difference. Just because you're religious does not necessarily make you spiritual. It's kind of like one of the things in the Buddha, the Eightfold Path that I made little videos of. One of the things was the right thought, the right speech, I was going to say the right path, but it's all part of the right path. And knowing, you have to know whether or not you're truly doing the right things. I think the things were the right view, the right thought, the right livelihood. There was a whole thing I did on that. The right speech, the right efforts, the right mindfulness, and the right meditation. I think those are the 8. So question yourself if you have a tendency to always be late. If there's nothing on the next slide, okay. Always arguing. Okay. I think we're doing okay on time. I think we'll cover this particular pattern, and that should do it for this evening. But always arguing. There are some people, and I know you know people, you say it's white, no, it's black. You tell them the sky is blue, no, it's green. Well, it's not really blue, it's more like a turquoise blue. A little something to stimulate an argument, no matter what. So if this is something that you do, is this do for you how it does make you feel? Okay, crazy English. If you do this, how does it make you feel? Why the argument? Who in your family was an arguer? What is the goal being sought here outside of rejection? Arguing is, some people argue just, again, to get the rejection. It may be to prove to your partner that they were wrong and you were right. To your children, because when it comes to the emotional self, not only is it to your partner, but it's also to your children. It could also be with the people you work with, because when you work with people, you're there. It's more than a social situation. A social connotation has different parameters. When you're working with somebody, if you're in an executive boss position, it's a different relationship, and it is personal. Even as much as you try to maintain a separate distance, it still ends up being emotionally connected. I mean, I'm working with people in the company, 12, 15, 20, 25 years. We have a relationship of sorts. So when there's an argument, You need to question, how is it making you feel? What is being sought? Where is the argument coming from? What are you arguing about? And who in your family is the person who is always stirring the pot, always getting things mixed up, and always starting an argument? I think I'm going to stop here because I see a typo, which means I should go back over my stuff. I guess I got distracted. Can't always stay on task. I mean, I do, because I write for myself work lists, things to do. I always have a clipboard. I don't know if you can see this or not, but I always have a clipboard that always has what I have to do. And as you saw, I put a pencil line through it. That lets me know that I've completed it. So I'm going to stop here. I think I've given you a few things to think about. If you have any questions about any of this, please feel free to drop me a line and we can discuss it, go deeper into something. My goal with you is to get you to think and question and even challenge. And I think I may have said that before, because the more that you can argue with me about this, and argue with yourself about this information, I think the more you'll understand the value of it and appreciate it even more. It's like being the devil's advocate to yourself, really putting it to the test. And I think you'll find, as I found over the last 45, 50 years that I've been working with the information, that it never fails to provide an insight that will lead to an understanding, or an understanding outright. It certainly has helped me gain emotional control and mastery over certain aspects of my life. If you knew my life growing up as my cousins do, I will tell you that they are pretty much amazed that my life is where it's at based on where I started. I know that anybody, everybody, will benefit from the universal teachings, will benefit from understanding the patterns of behavior they operate with, learning symbology so that they can see the patterns at work, which will help them get to the concepts, so that when the pattern, because remember, the concepts tied into your ego never wants to die, even though it's essential that you give up the emotional self, that you allow the ego to die, doesn't want to die. And so by reading symbols, you're able to capture the pattern in its cyclic unfolding, so that wherever you capture it gives you the opportunity to change an attitude within. And in changing that attitude, you change the outcome of the pattern. So on that note, I will say thank you to each and every one of you, and have yourselves a pleasant evening.